All right. Big welcome, everyone. We'll give it still one more minute for people to arrive. All right, warm welcome to everyone. Maria, I'll leave it for you to keep on allowing participants in, and I'll take the chance to say hello again. A big welcome from a freezing Stockholm and from all of us at Reformaten. My name is Pelle. I am the head of advocacy at Reformaten, and I will be moderating today's conversation, which we also are recording. We have 2 packed hours ahead of us, including a 5 minutes coffee break, and then final 30 minutes dedicated to a Q&A session. I am joined here by my colleagues, David and Mariana. They will both help ensure that we don't miss any questions or reflections during the Q&A part. And if something comes to mind during the presentations, please feel free to write our questions, and we will make sure to address them in the chat during the Q&A session. Let me briefly present the names of today's program: Dr. Christopher Turner, Dr. Fiorella Picchioni, Professor Paul Nkegbe, Aimée Wallin, Maame Osaah Asamoah, Olga Grönvall Lund, and Jecinta Atieno Okumu. This is a joint webinar between Reformaten in Stockholm and our friends and partners at Ghana Food Movement in Accra. And since this conversation really began through that collaboration, I am very happy to hand over the starting words to Aimée Wallin, co-director at Ghana Food Movement, to say a few words about why we're here today and how this partnership came to start.
Thank you so much, Pelle. And hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on nutrition and food environments and schools. And this webinar is part of a bigger project that we just kickstarted, Ghana Food Movement and Reformaten, where we want to bring together practitioners and research towards better school food environments. And that is why we're so happy to have you join us today. We will talk much more about Ghana Food Movement and our Ghana Plate project later, but for now, I just want to wish you welcome, and we're really excited for all of you to contribute in the chat, write your comments, your questions, your contributions, and please let's all introduce each other in the chat. So you can type your institution, what brings you to this webinar, and then we can start connecting already in the chat. And I will leave it at that.
Fantastic. And Jecinta, you will be our first speaker. You are a research coordinator at the Forum for Africa Studies at Uppsala University, and you're also representing here today the Guild Aurua Cluster of Research Excellence on Food Environment Actions for the Promotion of Health. And I'll just leave the word to you to introduce food environment as a concept to us. So welcome.
Thank you very much. Let me just share my PowerPoint. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Pelle, and thank you, Food what was the name? The Ghana organization. Thank you very much for the invite.
Jecinta, you can do it in full screen still, the presentation, if you'd like.
All right. There. Now. Right?
Perfect.
All right. And I'll start from the beginning here. All right. As you heard, I'm Dr. Jecinta Okumu. I work here at Uppsala University at the Forum for Africa Studies. And part of my work is research coordination within the cluster of food environment for promotion of health that we have a short word FE for H here. And I suppose most of you are asking, what are the cause? What does it mean to be a cluster of excellence? And I think I'll start by that before I introduce what food environments and the framework is at this point. So there are 22 clusters of research excellence as of now, unless they've added a third one, a 23rd one, which I'm not sure. But this is an initiative led by the Guild and ARUA. So ARUA, for those of you that do not know, is the African Research University Alliance that brings together academic institutions within Africa. And the Guild is the European equivalent to that, that brings about so many European institutions of research. So within the cause, it's a collaboration between different African and European institutions. And the whole idea for the cause was to sort of address the societal and the scientific challenges that are framed by the EU Innovation Agenda. I have the links here and I'll share the slides later if you want to sort of read more on this. So the EU Innovation Agenda, they have different priorities areas. And this cause, the 22 cause, target especially 4 of these priority areas. So we have the priority area on public health, which our core belong to, the food environment core belongs to public health. There's also 8 other clusters within public health. And then we have the green transition priority area, which has 4 different clusters or cores, as we call them. And we have the innovation and technology that has 5 different clusters. And capacity for science has 3 different other clusters. Even though this initiative is between ARUA and the Guild, it is not closed for organization outside of this or that are not members to this too. So as of now, we have a participation of organization beyond this network up to 120 institutions across 42 countries. For our cluster here at Uppsala University, the Food Environment for Promotion of Health cluster, we have a number of members both in Africa and Europe, as I said, and the organization of it is that we have 1 institution per continent that is sort of the core institution coordinating the day-to-day running of the clusters. So in our case, in Africa, it is the University of Cape Town that is, and the cluster is represented by Jane Battersby, who is a physical geographer. And then in Sweden, we have Uppsala University as the other co-lead, represented by Mina David-Nam, who is a medical doctor by background and a public health practitioner as of now. The other members are University of Ghana, Makerere University, Addis Institute of Public Health, and Tanzania Food and Nutritional Center. There are other partners that are not listed here, but these are just to mention a few. In Europe, we have University of Glasgow, Greenwich, and Copenhagen, and then Center for Food Policy, University of London. We have SLU, Karolinska, and of course, Reformaten, that is organizing today's webinar. We have Fonnier Selabet and Arbinses. Again, there are many other members that are not mentioned here, but this is just to give you a nutshell. And what the overall aim for this core is to advance the science, the practice, and policy around food environments, really, and to address the challenges of food environment. But we come in from a health perspective. So our overall objective is to improve health through the lens of food environments. And what we do is then through supporting early career researchers in this field, we also have a lot of members who do different cutting edge research. Of course, it's very collaborative research. It's transdisciplinary research, as you can see in our website. But we also focus on issues around education and policy that are related to enhancing food environments. I was specifically requested to introduce what the food environment framework is. And in a nutshell, is just a way, it's a framework or a way, it's a public health and social science approach that we use to understand the context that people live in and the context that people interact with food. So what influences the kind of food that is available, the kind of food that people choose, the kind of food that is marketed and everything else. So the most important thing is that it is a public health and social science approach. Of course, it's an approach that then brings together very transverse perspective, disciplines, and everything else to work together to sort of understand the structural and environmental determinants of diets. So it's sort of a framework that moves away from focusing on the individual agency aspect and focuses on the structural aspects and environmental determinants. So issues like availability, accessibility, affordability, marketing, and everything else, policy issue, cultural and social norms that sort of influence the food environments that we interact with. There are different frameworks out here, food environment frameworks. Our core particularly uses the framework suggested by Turner et al. All the framework sort of looks at, if you go into detail, they look at the same issues, the same structural issues, but from different angles. So like I said, our core's main objective is to address health or to promote health. That is sort of the overall objective. But we do that through focusing on both the external domains and the personal domains of food environments. And that is looking at the issues around choices that people make, for example. And that comes within the personal domain. So if an individual has money to buy food or not money, those kind of individual level choices or things that affect individual choices. But we also look at the external domain, and this is where most of the structural issues come in. So the marketing, the policy, the kind of food, agricultural practices around, and everything else. And these two domains are looked at from different lenses. So we have, like I said, a very diverse representation of fields within our cluster. We have geographers, we have medical people, we have biographers, and IT guys. And so these are the lenses that we use to sort of understand the domains of food environment. So we look at lived experiences research, we look at issues around population and environmental mapping, we look at issues of data and analytics, issues around urban planning approaches, governance approaches, and everything else. There are, of course, other frameworks that focus on maybe micro and macro aspects of environments. Again, that is just a different perspective to understanding what a food environment framework is. So just to summarize and to sort of tie up how the core and the food environment framework fits within today's webinar, I think what our core contextualizes or focuses on are the issues, general issues. So we are moving away from the issues around agency so much, not individual agency, but we look at the structural issues on food consumption. We look at issues around the environment. So if it's a school environment, if you're at a workplace, what, for example, influence you to eat what you eat? Do you have restaurants? Do you have fresh food? Do you have machines? Those kind of questions. But we also look at issues around the environment and the impact it has on our eating patterns. And I think Aimée will talk more about this when we especially look at the NOVA classifications and the UPFs and everything else. I think Ghana Food really wants to focus on what was before, how people were eating a lot of things in the first classification and why it has changed to where now we are mostly eating things that ultra processed foods a lot. So the argument is that environments can either be supportive or not. And like I said, we are moving away from the agency on food, individuals having agency and looking at the structural issues. But I also pointed out that we are very much interested in the health and here focusing on the NCDs and how the food environments really influence issues. For example, obesity, we see that there's a lot of obesity going up now. We have, at the same time, we have malnutrition on the different side of the curve. We have issues around diabetes and how that links to the kind of foods we eat, for example. So sort of looking at the corporate determinants of health, looking at issues around policies and marketing in environments. I think I'll stop there just to give you a brief introduction for the webinar today. Thank you, Pale.
Thank you so much, Jecinta. And I'll just go on and introduce Dr. Christopher J. Turner. You're a senior lecturer in food systems and public health nutrition at the University of Greenwich. Dr. Fiorella Picchioni, who is a research fellow at the University of Bristol Business School, and Professor Paul Nkegbe, who is a professor of applied economics and dean at the University for Development Studies in Ghana. So we will now meet three renowned researchers, and we will especially learn more about the political economy analysis of the food industry project. I'll welcome you to present.
Thank you, Pele, and hi, everybody. It's really nice to be here. Thanks for the kind invitation. So as Pele mentioned, we're just going to give an overview of the PIFI project, as we call it, the Political Economy Analysis of the Food Industry Project. But just to lead us into that, we just thought we'd spend a few minutes describing a little bit around food environments and how we consider food environments to be a key interface within the wider food system, and building on what Jecinta's just presented as well. So Fiorella, you're going to control the slides, I believe. So if you could go to the next slide. So if we look at the big picture, what we've seen over the past decade or so, which is around food environments, is this growing global interest and recognition really of the role that food environments play in shaping dietary, nutrition, and health outcomes. And if you see at the bottom of the slide here, there was a series of reports from around 2016, so as I said, around 10 years ago, that really started to show this momentum in thinking around food environments. So from the global panel, from the UN Steering Committee on Nutrition, and also the two to the right-hand side there from the HLP, which is a high-level panel of experts on food security and nutrition. So these came out from around, as I said, 2016, 2017, and then on to 2020. The very one to the right-hand side was really important in that it made a key contribution, which I'll show you in the next slide. And here, what they really sought to do was to set out a framework for food systems. So Fiorella, if you just want to move to the next slide, I'll speak to that. Thank you. So here, this is the food systems framework that was published in 2020. It was building on an earlier one from 2017 as part of that high-level panel of experts report. There's clearly a lot to take in here, but the key thing that I want to show you on the next slide is this idea of the food environment as being this key interface within the wider food system. So really linking food supply chains with consumer behaviors and then dietary outcomes to the right-hand side, as well as those wider nutrition and health outcomes, and then downstream broader impacts. So this was really key in sort of setting that high-level agenda around food environments. So on the next slide, as I said, we've seen this increasing consensus around the importance of food environments as this key interface. And what we've also seen is this increasing recognition that food environments are comprised of diverse food sources. So originally, a lot of food environment research was from high-income country contexts, such as the UK and the US. There was a strong focus around the idea of food deserts, which you may be familiar with this idea, whether you have often underprivileged populations living in areas with very limited economic and social and environmental access to healthy, nutritious foods. So a lot of this thinking was developed from this idea of food deserts. And what we started to see was people trying to apply this concept in low middle income country context. And so around this time, around 2016, I was invited to lead a working group that was led by the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and the Agriculture, Nutrition and Health Academy to start to think through some key concepts for what food environments might look like more globally, So here we started to recognize this importance of wider food sources. So food environments can be comprised of market-based sources. They could be formal or informal markets. They could be agricultural production, whether that be urban or peri-urban or rural agriculture. It could also be through gifts and transfers, or even wild food harvesting from the environment, the wider environment around. So food environments, diverse food sources. What we then sought to do was to map this idea of the food environment within the wider food system and really hone in on the food environment as that key interface, as I've mentioned already. And so here's a framework that we put together as part of that working group and published in 2018. We have the food environment as this white box or this interface within the wider food system. And then we unpack this in terms of the external domain and the personal domain. So the idea here was to really take a sort of socio-ecological approach, which is trying to understand these interactions between people and their environment. So in the external domain, we have dimensions such as food availability or food prices, vendor and product properties, and marketing and regulation. So you can think of that as very much the world that's out there that we interact with as part of our daily lives and activities. And then on the right-hand side, we have the personal domain, which is very much relative to individuals. So here we have things like food accessibility, affordability, convenience, and desirability. And then interactions between these various domains and dimensions are really what we consider to shape food acquisition and consumption, and then those wider nutrition and health outcomes. So this was the way that we started to think about food environments in a slightly different way to perhaps what had been done previously, thinking about those interactions between individuals and their wider environment, and start to map out this kind of key interface and what that might look like. So this work has seen some real great traction across research, across policy, and practice as well. We've been really thrilled with the engagement on this. At the time we developed it, it was very much a kind of a thought process really, and a kind of theoretical conceptual approach. Since then, we've done a lot of work, and colleagues and partners across the world from diverse settings have applied this framework in various settings and really started to think through and try and understand, okay, well, what works, perhaps what could be improved and what's missing. So in the next slide, you'll see we published a technical brief last summer. So this was launched at the Agriculture, Nutrition and Health Academy conference in Malawi. In Tanzania. And here you can see we expanded the working group to a broader group of colleagues from a range of different institutions around the world, also leading researchers as well as PhD students working on food environment research. And the next slide, what you'll see is a revised version of the framework. And then in the next slide, again, we've got a slightly bigger version. Essentially here, what we've tried to do is expand on some of this based upon the learning that we have kind of accrued over the past decade or so. I won't go through all the detail here. What I will do is put a link in the chat. So if you do want to download the technical brief that supports this, you can do and look at it in your own time. And here we unpack this in a lot more detail. We're currently writing this up as a peer-reviewed journal article. So this is hopefully going to be coming out sometime later this year. But what we sought to do here in the external domain is really unpack some of those dimensions around vendor properties and food properties, so splitting them into different dimensions. We have the right-hand side on the personal domain, we've added dimensions around agency, around food literacy, and really added a bit more detail under each of those different dimensions. One of the key drives here was to focus on this idea of lived experience of food acquisition and consumption, really at the heart of those interactions between the external and personal domains. And to me, I think this really breathes some life into that idea of those interactions or socio-ecological interactions that we described before, which is very abstract in many ways. But if we think about it in terms of that lived experience, we can then think of it in terms of at the individual level or at the household level as a collective lived experience or as that wider community level. And here this also starts to address some of those kind of multi-scalar aspects that we were perhaps missing in the original framework itself. Also from left to right, we really go from the kind of external environmental aspects through that collective lived experience that then filters down to the individual level at the personal domain, and then those individual dietary and nutrition and health outcomes from left to right as we look across the framework. So this is very much, as I said, it's a grey literature update of what we originally published in 2018. We're working on revising this now. I just thought I'd share it today as a bit of wider context around sort of how the conceptual thinking around food environments has evolved. So I think now what I'll do is I'll pass over to Paul, who's going to talk a bit about in more detail around the political economy analysis of the food industry project. Paul, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. So, following what Chris has given us, I want to introduce our project in Ghana, PEFI. It's PEAFI, Political Economy Analysis of the Food Industry. This project just ended. Oh, in fact, it will end very soon. We had a low-cost extension. Fiorella, can we go to the next slide? Yes, just a bit about ultra-processed foods. Nova classification defines that, as formulations of ingredients, mostly exclusive industrial use that result from a series of industrial purposes. And there are some key objectives in mind. Usually, the profit maximization is behind. Intensive marketing and hyper palatable products are designed, of course, to entice people so that they can make more profit, and displacement of healthier foods in diets, especially the local ones. We can move on, Fiorella. Next slide, please. Yeah. Now, just to answer the question, why focusing on UPFs in Ghana? I mean, there are a number of reasons why that was important for our project. For instance, Ghana is fast growing. I mean, our process is the development of Ghana is actually, we are moving faster into the middle income country status. So processed foods account for a larger share of foods in Ghana, especially within the urban environment. And UPFs account for more than 30% of all processed foods. The market value of UPFs also between 2012 and 2018 tripled, and it is again forecasted to grow at one of the highest rates worldwide. And it is projected that by 2028, retail sales of packaged food in Ghana will grow by 69% compared to 2023, 2024. And that is like 8.7 billion. It's nearly about 10% of Ghana's GDP in all. We can move on, Fiorella. Then also is the trends of obesity and overweight in Ghana. What the diagram on top is actually by 2016, for example, girls, the obesity for girls, we will see a certain trend, stood at 3%, and that was projected to increase to about 4% by 2020. And then also the diagram below is actually overweight. That is also growing. For instance, overweight was projected to hit around 15% for girls. If you check the trend, both for boys and girls, the trend is on the increase. And I mean, that should present a cause for concern. And that in a way justifies the focus we had for UPFs in Ghana. Fiorella, can we move to the next? Yes. Right. The project was framed within the critical political economy and uses what we refer to as a systems of provision approach. It was to help us map how these commodities are produced, for us to trace the production of the commodities right from industry to consumption. But what we actually did was to do it backwards, to go to schools, identify these products, then we trace it back to industry. So this project had three major phases. We had phase one, where we started by we did some scoping review that gave us some knowledge regarding the industry in Ghana. And having done that, we did some stakeholder mapping or actor mapping within the industry, all of this within the phase one. So we actually came up with some policy and legislative environment reviews within the phase one. And in phase two, we moved into doing pilots, some photo voice pilots for both pupils and then vendors in schools. So we held some, having done that, we were able to fine tune our instruments. Then we moved on to some photo voice workshops. After that, we looked at supply chain mapping and then also institutional and policy perspective or mapping. All of this within the phase two. And most of this actually took part in Tamale. I'll be speaking to that very soon. The second phase, most of it actually took part within Tamale. And then we then move on to the third phase, which is data analysis and then engagement. We'll be talking about all of this. Fiorella, can we move to the next slide? So just to mention about the field settings, it is Tamale is shown on the map of Ghana we have here with the red dot on top. And as I mentioned earlier, phase two, most of the activities within phase two actually took place in Tamale. Now, the level of study, the levels, we had 3 levels of analysis apart from the phases. We have the micro level, meso, and then the macro. At the micro level, we actually worked with the students, food vendors within the school environment. With the meso level, what we tried to do there was to kind of track wholesalers, etc., some wholesalers within Tamale. And we concentrated on Tamale because Tamale is rapidly urbanizing. So it has some characteristics of the major city of Accra and some other smaller cities. So Tamale became the most appropriate place to do this. Then also is a third work package still within the phase two. That third work package is actually the macro level of analysis. And emphasis there was on industry players, policy makers and regulators, etc. Fiorella, can we move on? Having given this. Right, so let me pass this on now to Fiorella, who is controlling the presentation. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So just to reiterate basically what Paul has mentioned. So yeah, we used 3 different levels of analysis: micro, meso, and macro. And to each of them, we have assigned a specific work package. So work package 1, from the point of consumption in school food environments, where we have identified 3 where the students helped us identify 3 products that then we traced all along at the meso level in work package 2, conducting a supply chain analysis. And then finally, to understand where the supply chain analysis fits, we also conducted a broader overview of the role of the regulators and policy, and also the function of the companies and producing companies and multinationals. In terms of methods, so in work package 1, we have used the photo voice. So basically ask the students to take pictures of their food environments, school food environments, and then they brought us through a conversation that pointed us to the ultra processed foods that then we have kind of follow through their supply chains. At the meso level, we followed kind of a more conventional supply chain analysis, although we filtered in some specific questions on power, relationality, and place. And then finally, the third phase was very much multi-method. So it was a combination of desk-based reviews together with semi-structured interviews and with key informants. So we have summarized everything in the toolkit. That was was the main sort of outcome of our project, and I believe there will be a link in the chat with the toolkit. So if there is any questions or you want to kind of dig a bit deeper, you can consult that. And I will now pass on to Chris to quickly kind of explain how the toolkit is organized, and then dig a bit deeper into the work package 1, into the food environment sector.
Yeah, thanks, Fiorella. So on the next slide, as Fiorella mentioned, we're just going to give a brief overview of what you can expect to find for the different work packages in the toolkit. So here for work package 1, that's very much, as we mentioned, focusing on the school food environment and the food environment in and around schools that the adolescents experience in urban, peri-urban and rural settings of Tamale. So here we developed a work package where we really wanted to investigate those food acquisition and consumption practices as part of their daily lives. We use school as the entry point, but we were interested across home, school and leisure environments, so as part of their daily lives and activities. We ran workshops effectively using the photo voice methodology, which was a one-day methodology, a kind of compressed version, which we can sort of run in one day in a school setting. So as you see at the bottom here, if you just click on the next arrow, Fiorella, there is links to each of in the appendices of the toolkit. We have all of the instruments that we used for the topic guides, all the practical information, all the consent forms and things like that around how to run and manage participatory photography and photo voice within school settings. And there's also an overview here on the right-hand side about the key elements of the workshops. So we gave an introduction around the concept of food environments. We gave brief training on participatory photography. We then had the adolescents go out within their school environment and do participatory photography in and around lunchtime to capture the vendors and the products that they normally encounter. And then we printed out those photographs and had used them to facilitate focus group discussions in the afternoon with the adolescents themselves about their lived experience of their food environment. Here's a photo. You can see the participatory photography training. The right-hand side, you can see a screenshot of a pamphlet that we developed as a sort of innovative and interesting way of engaging the adolescents in how to do the participatory photography. So it's just a bit of a flavor of what you can expect to find in the toolkit itself. We also give some practical tips for how to run these types of workshops. As you can see, everything from finding the right space, organizing transport to and from venues, printing of photographs, picking the right time within the school day, which is can be a challenge, and also how to conduct the focus group discussions. And then there's also some suggested readings. So this is an overview of what you can expect to find for all of the work packages, but specifically this is the example from the food environment work package. And so here we have a collage of images and captions that the adolescents took of their school food environments. Again, this is from urban, peri-urban and rural school food environments in northern Ghana in Tamale. As you can see, the school food environment is just inundated with ultra-processed foods. In particular, here we focused on beverages and snacks. And these photos are from a range of the 3 different settings. And interesting to see the handwritten captions here as well, that kind of give you an idea of the types of things that were discussed in the focus group discussions. So in terms of the analysis, what was interesting about this project, at least to us, was that we were able to use the food environment framework to operationalize this wider system of provisioning theory from the political economy analysis. So we won't talk about that much here, but just to say what we were able to do across the different work packages and across the different levels of the project was to develop an integrated code book, which was an integrated way of analyzing all the data that we collected throughout the project, from Tamale to the meso level and through the distribution chain all the way back to Accra to the UPF, ultra processed food industry itself and the key players and actors there. So that was an innovative approach which we found really interesting. To me, it was very much the kind of the geography of the ultra processed food industry in Ghana as it unfolded and as it was impacted. So on the next slide now, I believe I'm going to pass back to Paul, who's going to talk us through a bit of the dissemination and local engagement and activities that we ran for the project.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Throughout the project, in fact, at the time we started, we had engagement with some academics and some policy people. But after we had our results, we also had engagement. The picture we are seeing now, we had this exhibition within a studio in Tamale. And it was interesting from the perspective of the children, the understanding of food environments, etc. And then also we had school authorities coming. So these are additional pictures from the exhibition. So we have a cross-section of people. The school children, all 4 schools were there. Then education authorities and some policymakers all attended this dissemination. Yeah. Let me pass the back to, is it Fiorella to continue with the rest? Yeah.
I think we're about to know it. I could jump in to speak briefly about the some of the other activities. So we also engage across a range of different platforms. So one of those was the Agriculture, Nutrition and Health Academy Conference that I mentioned earlier that was in Tanzania last summer. We're sort of quite heavily involved in the A&H network. It's a conference, but it's also a wider whole science communication platform around science policy interface on agriculture, nutrition and health. So the substream of that A&H Academy was what also funded this project called Imana, which is on innovative methods and metrics for agriculture nutrition actions. So as you can see here, we're at the conference in Tanzania. We had a poster, we had a learning lab where we were teaching a toolkit to researchers and practitioners from the A&H community. So I think it was about 500-600 people at the conference, and we had around 30-40 people at the learning lab. And then Fiorella gave a really fantastic presentation on the main findings, which I believe you're going to go on and speak to now a little bit, Fiorella.
Yes, before the findings and the kind of policy recommendations that kind of we derive from the project, a quick kind of small example of then how did we brought to contexts, different contexts, the findings from Tamale. So in this example, we have engaged secondary school children through an art-based workshop in Bristol, which is a city in the southwest of England, to think about ultra-processed food in their school food environment, starting from the experiences of their fellow schoolers in Tamale, and to also invite them to think about the global and systemic underpinnings of ultra-processed food rather than ultra-processed food as something that is an issue of individual consumption and self-restraint. So now I'm kind of zooming back again to Ghana and to kind of the whole, kind of trying to give a conclusion in terms of why this matters, why it's important to kind of start in a very localized context, then kind of zoom out to the more structural and systemic aspects of ultra-processed foods. So in our analysis, we really show that a multiscalar examination for example, of ultra-processed food can unveil the full cycle of demand creation, which is shaped by production processes as well as social and individual markers, which of course have important implications for policy and interventions. In particular, what we found very important to highlight is that ultra-processed food dissemination operates through a capillary operation, and it is a sector that mobilizes both formal and informal actors through hyper-local and responsive and tightly networked systems. And we have shown also that there is a strong alliance of convenience across global actors, multinational actors, regional players, and national ultra-processed food producers that share infrastructure, coordinate action to shape, maintain, and increase consumption of ultra-processed foods. So then to conclude, what does this mean in terms of policy? So we are going to focus on three key kind of policy takes. The first one is about school feeding. So Ghana school feeding programs offer a fantastic and very strong foundation for promoting child nutrition, and opportunities exist to expand their focus to include the prevention of overweight, obesity, and diet-related non-communicable diseases. So what are the measures that we suggest? So first of all, establishing clear national standards for food and beverages in and around schools. Second one is to upgrading food, health, and hygiene curricula to address the proliferation of ultra-processed food and healthy alternatives. And then thirdly, to strengthen governance by actively engaging the Ghana Education Service, school health education programs, parent-teachers association, and the students themselves to enhance accountability and position schools as supportive, health-promoting environments across all levels, not only primary schools, but also secondary. In the second bubble, we focus on the informal sector. So our study shows that food supply chain are underscored by the central role of informal food vendors. And most of them in and around schools are women that have are facing strong economic hardship given the high inflation of the country. So this means that blanket bans or restrictive ultra-processed food measures implemented without viable alternatives for these women risk undermining livelihoods and exacerbating social inequalities, particularly for those really at the margins of society. So what are the possible solutions? Collective or informal vendors, such as cooperatives, should be actively engaged in policy design and implementation. There should be more promotion of measures that create structural incentives to prepare and sell safe, freshly cooked foods. And then more integrated linkages between vendor groups and national programs to promote domestic food production that moves toward healthier and more accessible food environments through improved distribution and preparation. And then finally, when we have done our policy mapping, we see there are policy contradictions between economic growth and public health imperatives. So this is not a new thing. It is very much at a core of economic development, and then the externalities that happen. But these externalities have to be better integrated, and there should be a planning across agricultural, industrial policy, and trade policy that encompass public health prerogatives and interests. And with this, I think we have taken over all of the time that we've been given. Thank you very much, and we really hope to continue the engagement and take on all the questions that are present. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And as you notice, this last picture is still on the screen, and that is for you to explore what you will find through the QR code. Now we will do a quick coffee break, some minutes. I will actually be so bold and say that we will be back 1:50 already, Stockholm time. That would be 12:50 Accra time. So we'll do quick minutes as a short break, and then we reassume again. Thank you. One might say that a break of 2 minutes is not a break, but we are too excited to get to share and disseminate all of these amazing people presenting and the results being presented. So bear with me, the program is starting already now. But I want to start with saying welcome back from the pause and introducing that we are now shifting focus. We're going from the academic research to two different but yet so similar food movements. We will start this journey here in Stockholm, and then we will continue to Accra. And it is therefore with great pride that I introduce my friend and my colleague, Olga Grönvall Lund. Olga, 5 years ago, had enough of, how you often put it, Olga, the unnecessary suffering for peoples, animals, and nature. So I'll give to you Olga Grönvall Lund, the founder and secretary general of Reformaten.
Thank you, Pelle. So nice to be here. And I'm going to start to share slides right away. Let me see. Okay, so is it working now?
No screen being shared yet. But now it works.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Perfect. I'm not a digital person at all, so luck. Anyways, so when we speak about this topic of food environment, like that is the strategical focus area of Reformaten. And when people think about Sweden, many people think about like health, equality, fresh, innovative, but that's a very good picture that our very talented lobbyist organizations draw up. So our food environments are filled with shit as well. And in Europe, Sweden is one of the countries eating most ultra-processed food. But our public authorities doesn't really like to speak about that. But to give you a glimpse of how bad it is, like this is actually our Swedish finance minister on the left side standing in a super, I say, bad market with a non-organic bag of chips and saying that this makes people happy and it's creating economic growth. On the other side, you see here the guy with the Coca-Cola. That's the Swedish agriculture minister, Peter Kullgren, drinking a Coca-Cola with his name on. So, and then you have Ebba Busch Thor, which is also a minister in Sweden. So our situation in Sweden is actually not that good. And this is actually the Swedish political like food advisory board consisting of companies like Coca-Cola and other shit companies, so to say. So this picture that people have of Sweden of being healthy, fair, non-corrupt and so on, forget it. We're not that good at all and we could be brilliant. So in Reformaten, we are pushing for a future that's way more looking like this, with more community controlled spaces and where it's easy to consume right kind of food. So the vision is like food system which leading to health for people, planet and animals. And mission is to accelerate the research-based transformation of the food environments. So exactly how Chris described the framework, we use the food environment to access the bigger vision of the whole food systems. We use the framework of the One Health, as I mentioned before, so see that everything is integrated and interconnected. So we are really tired of the framework like the 17 global sustainability goals, because we see that companies or nations, they take one goal, they do really good, and they fuck up the rest that they don't report on. So therefore, we prefer to use this framework instead. And our focus areas within the organization is we have 3 different ones. So it's first like pushing political instruments, then contributing to change of infrastructure, both like temporarily and permanent, and then being a people's movement for engagement in these questions. So we speak about active citizens rather than perfect consumers, because if you say that people should just like consume right kind of food, then it becomes a question of class and education. Who can afford it, who has the knowledge about it, but also who has the accessibility to it. So we describe this question way more in the topic of like human rights, like everyone has the right to live in food environments which enables health and sustainability. So absolutely shifting the focus from the individual perspective to the system perspective, which the framework of food environment does. And also we see that everyone has the right to be equalitarian. So no matter if you're vegan, pescatarian, whatever Aryan you are, then we speak about the quality of the produce and how it's affecting the landscape and soil health and so on, but also the quality of the food system. Like, is it does it come from a food system with the current like super bad market where the farmer receives a very tiny bit of the profit, or is it more cooperative models where the farmer has way more like control or a better position? And also we work with more holistic and proactive solutions over reactive and isolated solutions. So For example, we don't work with the topic of like food waste. We work like how can we, with policies, prevent food waste, because these kinds of food should not be produced from the very beginning. So therefore, we try to like separate the different activities in what is problems versus root causes versus consequences. So if like the problem here is how we treat the world's water and land to produce food, then the consequences for us is like sick people, planet and animals, and the root causes are the industrial food systems, which are a result of the political and economic structures. So we are not looking into this kind of we are not so pro medication. We want to prevent medication, so to say. And therefore we separate what kind of different food systems exist, because we see in like some kind of food system we should do more like harm minimization. So like within the super bad market systems, then we should instead say that please super bad market, stop to do commercials on food that is causing sickness to the kids. But either way, if it's more organic in the super bad market, the farmers still receive such a tiny bit of the profit, so it's still not a holistically good solution. So therefore, we have to look on the different kind of food system, what kind of actions we do in each system. And in Reformaten, we say that the transformation, it's beautiful, fun, and tasty. It's not that we're going to do boring things that is tasting bad. Like it's such a relief that we're going to leave these shitty food environments where people are sick. It's just like a lot of shitty alternative, and we're going to have alternative that is way more tasty and is leading to a positive future. So for us, the framing is very important. So it is not a negative thing that we're doing. It's a positive thing and uniting forces. And within Reformaten, we do a lot of different kind of work in and around the topic of food environment. So we host educations, we do different kind of events, we participate in media and blah, 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 blah. But I have so few minutes, so I'm not going to go into that. And I'm going to speak what we do within more the food environment. But in Reformaten, the most important thing we got is our volunteers. So we have most of our work is done through volunteers that want to engage and help us, because we have a high integrity, so we don't receive money from the industry and say no to a lot of collaboration requests, because we want to be able to say what I say, fuck the industry. So therefore we more use the power of the people to be able to do the work we do. So all the graphics, photography, event organization, it's just like a lot of talented people that's just helping out, because they see that what we do is pushing for a real transformation. It's not like, oh, making the shit a little bit less shit. And we have like a farmer council with small scale farming organization that believe in more like agriculture from like agroecology perspectives, and treat or look at food more like primarily as a human right, and then second as like trading commodities, so to say. So Nordbruk, that's the Swedish part of La Via Campesina, which is like 200 million small-scale farmers around the world. So here we try to like unite good forces to push against the very strong industry in Sweden. Then we also have like a multidisciplinary research board, because many professors come from their silos. So like a professor within food and public health sometimes are not aware about how microorganisms and worms and soil works. So here we try to gather researchers from different disciplines, and that's guiding us to secure that our work is holistic and preventative, and it's according to the latest science. And then also we see now that like if you take these models of system change, you have the old system that's some of them have to die, I'm sad to say, or actually not sad at all. And then you have the emerging systems coming up, and you see so many good networks now working with totally alternative systems. And when they grow, the other systems will sooner or later collapse. So I'm very positive in the future, for the future. Yeah, as Pelle and Jecinta said, we are part of the center, and we find it very interesting to work on an international scale, because in Sweden, this topic is very new, because somehow the industry got under the radar that Sweden is not that healthy as they think they are. So when we are in international setting, we learn way more how different continents and the organizations has worked with food environment for a longer time than you have done in Sweden, for example. Then also, like, we are part of Mission Food Environment, which is like a platform founded by Vinnova, which is the Swedish innovation agency. And this is a national platform that we do together with Södertälje Municipality and Matlust, and then Organic Sweden and WWF. So here we work with stakeholder engagement, mobilization, policy suggestions, and trying to push this topic on a national and international scale. We also work with, we have run like a EU project that was about how can we take down the Green Deal into more local context and see how the topic of food environment can be implemented, on a local basis. So here we worked during a year to create a vision for, like a model for a vision for how you can engage different stakeholders within a city and teach them about the topic of food environment, because many people are not aware of it. And then together through a different settings of workshop, create a vision of a beautiful food environment. So this, Pelle, we should actually add a link in the chat for this, because it's such a good, the English version. So here we have like this beautiful vision that is written together, where the city suddenly have a food, like a food environment mayor, and then we have tied different policy proposals connected to this vision of how we can do with real world examples. Then we also have another thing, we have developed something called an action map. We have, together with different universities, mapped out different places all around the world where different policies has been implemented to change food environment, both ongoing research, but also where actual implementation has happened. So I really recommend you to go into this beautiful map, because here so much good information can be spread. And right now we don't have any time to do stupid tours. We have to do intelligent shortcuts, because as Pelle said, I hate unnecessary suffering, and this could really minimize it and cause joy instead. Then also we work with a tool that we have developed called the Matbarometern, which is an annual survey, which we do directed to the national political parties. And so far we have only done it in Sweden, but here we base like a survey and ask the political parties to take stand in different questions. And those one we base in everything from European framework to recommendation that our public health or public food agencies suggest that the politicians should do. And here we see that the politicians are absolutely not educated in this topic. The industry have so much control over the politicians. So the willingness amongst the political parties is actually not so high in implementing the research-based suggestions. Yeah. So sad. Then also, like as we see that we work a lot with, here you can see choir, or the last before. We have developed an event format, which is like we welcome everyone to a future 10 years ahead from now, where the food systems or the food environments are in the control of the community. So here we have done a meal experience that during 2 or 3 hours invite the participants to have different role in community controlled food systems. And through putting people in different mind shifts, then we can get people to think in other ways. So here we mix different policymakers and so we really try to showcase beautiful mixtures and world examples that different futures are possible and available. And Pelle, I'm going to stop there. So I kept my time. Are you proud?
I've never been more proud, Olga. Thank you so much. And the attentive viewer could also spot Christopher Turner in our research council as well. So big shout out to Christopher Turner. We will actually continue now to Accra, and we will get to know Ghana food movement more in depth. Here you are showing what an alternative approach to nutrition and school projects could look like. And I'm so happy to introduce our friends, Aimée Wallin, co-director of Ghana Food Movement, and Maame Osaah Asamoah, project coordinator of Ghana Food Movement. So you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Pelle. I think Maame will share our presentation. Thank you, Olga, for that presentation. I always get so excited when I hear about Reformaten's work. And when we first got to know about each other, we were really surprised, like, wow, we're doing so similar things with a similar approach on two complete different continents. And making our food system work beautiful, fun, and tasty, that is exactly what it's about. So we are really happy to have an actual project where we get to work together towards better food systems. And I also wanted to say thank you to Chris, Paul, and Fiorella for your amazing presentation and your work. What you're presenting about the food environments in Tamale in northern Ghana is very similar to what we are experiencing around us in Accra, in Osaah, and with the partner schools that we have in other regions of Ghana. So the question is, what could an alternative food environment and food system look like? And that is the question that brought together the people that started Ghana Food Movement. So that was farmers, entrepreneurs, chefs, academics that saw the abundance of Ghana's local food system, our fertile soils, our climate resilient crops, our nutritious crops, our very deep food culture, our amazing food entrepreneurs, our youth that are ready to get to work. And the goal for Ghana Food Movement became to realize the full potential of all of these resources that we have in the country, to build a food system that serves people. We can go to the next, yes. So we started organizing as volunteers in 2019. In 2021, we registered as a nonprofit organization. And at the end of 2024, we were able to open our very own food education hub that we call The Kitchen and is located in Osaah. And at The Kitchen, we challenge the normal and we show what is possible with our local ingredients. So if anyone is in Accra or you're making your way through Accra, please come and visit us to see what we're talking about and taste what we are talking about. Since 2019, we've also been able to grow a big network of change makers and like-minded people. Today, we're 250 members. That is farmers, entrepreneurs, chefs, and many more. And of course, we stay active online to even reach more people. So we focus our work on 3 pillars. It is the community building that is really bringing together like-minded people. And that's how we started, and it's always going to be a very important part of the movement. So we do this through our WhatsApp platform, we do it through our memberships and also our members' events. Then we have the food education pillar, and that is to say that there's so much to learn about our food system if we want to transform our food system for the future and to be going into the right direction. We always need to go back and look at what our ancestors, what our traditions can tell us about what a sustainable food system can look like. So our food education happens through training programs, through knowledge gathering, and through events where we share our knowledge. But I'll get more into this. Then we have the local food promotion. That also really relates to the research presented. So if there is a big visibility and a big hype to these ultra processed foods, how can we shift that to actually bring coolness and hype and good energy to our local foods, our local crops, but also processed foods that are processed in a natural way in the country. So we do this through different campaigns. We have a Buy Ghana, Build Ghana campaign. We promote crops and products in our events. We do different pop-up events. So last week we hosted a Moringa cafe, and Moringa is one of our super crops. So to bring a coolness to young people and to say that, come, let's go to a Moringa cafe and celebrate what we have locally. On the other hand is matcha popping up in Ghana and having this big hype, but drinking matcha in Ghana is not going to benefit us. So let's focus on moringa. That's what we are trying to say. So we do all of this for better nutrition, more job opportunities, and more business opportunities. So coming back a little bit to our training program, we're currently training a group of young chefs, and a big part of their training is to do knowledge gathering. So they are going out in communities and participating in food systems to learn about farming, to learn about nutrition, climate resilient crops, to learn about preservation techniques, food waste management from people and communities that have been doing this from since forever. The solutions to our future food system is already out there. So that is why knowledge gathering is so important for us. And then we serve this food that our chefs are able to innovate with through this knowledge gathering. We serve it during our events. So through this knowledge exchange, our chefs are getting equipped to test and innovate the recipes for the future, basically. But now we have a new opportunity, and that is to also work with schools in the same way that we've been working before. So now, through the Ghana Plate project, which is funded by AFD, Fondation de France, and SFCI, our chefs that are doing this training and this knowledge gathering are going to be working with schools and school caterers to see what is possible when it comes to integrating indigenous and local crops into school meals. And of course, our realities at the kitchen in our hub in Osaah is very different from the school's realities, their logistics, their economy, and the politics around school feeding that we've talked about so much today. But what we share is an interest to bring more nutritious meals to school kids. And that is the starting point for our projects. Then we'll have to see what is possible and what will not work when it comes to integrating more of these nutritious crops into school meals, basically. Because the reality, we've talked about it, Paul has also mentioned it, but we are experiencing a triple burden of malnutrition in Ghana, undernutrition, micronutrition deficiency, and obesity. And when it comes to our farming landscape, it's also shifting towards more cash crops, less indigenous crops, degraded soils, a lot of foreign interest into our farming systems, while we could be focusing on our local crops that are climate resilient, that are nutritious, that are adapted to our ecologies. And at the same, just as I mentioned, this can be called NAS, so neglected and underutilized crops, and there's just so much potential in that. Ghana has a school feeding program that has also been mentioned, and it reaches a lot of youth, which also provides a very big potential to work with the school feeding program if some of our interventions are successful. Because there are some difficulties with the school feeding program as well. The cost per child is very low, while the food prices in the country are really rising, and it's very bureaucratic as well. And studies also show that there's quite low diversity and representation of food groups in the school feeding program currently. So there's a big opportunity for research and partnerships, and that is one of the main reasons why we wanted to gather you all for this webinar. We can study the enablers and barriers to the integration of nutritious crops in schools, just like we've studied the UPFs. We can study it on the other side, seeing what it might take to integrate local and indigenous crops into the school feeding. We can document and evaluate this process as we try it. We also need to combine our work with nutrition assessment to actually see if kids are getting healthier once we are able to incorporate these crops into the school meals. And as I keep saying, how do we combine it with continuously mapping our traditional foodways, our ancestral foodways, to make sure that all the resources and all the knowledge in the communities can actually be absorbed into the school feeding. Because, as I've already said, the solutions and the ways to eat healthy to cook healthy is already out there. So how do we combine our practical work with research that makes sure that we document the knowledge that is out in the food system? So now I will hand over to Maame to present a little bit more about our progress with the Ghana Plate program and what's next to expect.
Thank you, Aimée. Okay, so with the Ghana Plate project, our aim is to primarily influence the school food environment and mainly the hot meals that are served within the school food environment. And so within the project, we look to co-develop recipes and test them with the caterers and students and parents to make sure that nutrition is acceptable and culturally grounded. We're also looking at training the caterers, students, and parents also in nutrition, the local crops, and food safety. We also look to explore farmer school connections where we seek to connect farmers to schools and also understand the policies that shape school food environments. Aimée mentioned the Ghana School Feeding Program, which has a lot of bureaucracy and all of that. And we need to understand all these policies that shape what is available for the students to eat and access. We also talk about education and culture, which it aims to reclaim our local foods. Most of the kids have little to no idea of some of our indigenous crops and recipes and meals that are very nutritious. So the Ghana Plates project also aims to educate and reclaim our local foods. And when we talk about the Ghana school food environment, we are talking about all the places where children access food in and around the school. So we have the Ghana School Feeding Program, which Aimée went in depth into. It is government funded hot meals, basically. And she mentioned that the budget for each child is quite small, which limits the flexibility for nutritious variety. And not all public schools are also enrolled. We talk about school canteens, which are parents funded. So parents pay feeding fees to the school and the menus are shaped by the school management and parents. So the meals provided are slightly more nutritious than the school feeding program and it's more flexible. And then we have school approved vendors who are inside the school compounds. So they also sell hot meals and snacks during school hours. And they provide the children with more choice and variety. The meals differ slightly from the Ghana School Feeding Program and the canteen food, and is an important daily source for many students who want variety. Then we have the street food vendors. They are outside of the school gate, and school children access the street food vendors before and after school. Street food vendors sell hot meals, they sell snacks, they sell drinks, and most of these snacks and drinks are also ultra processed foods. And so schools and parents have little control over what the children access outside of the school from the street food vendors. And they have a strong influence on what the children prefer to eat and buy. So with the Ghana Plate framework, this is a framework we came up with from our earlier engagements with schools that we have already encountered. And with the framework, we have local nutrition, and that is prioritizing the indigenous and underutilized crops that Aimée mentioned that are very nutritious and they support the children's well-being. And with the local nutrition too, we are collaborating with school health education professionals. These are they are called SHEP coordinators. They are found in every school, mostly the government schools and also some of the private schools. And they are in charge of making sure the children are eating right, they're eating nutritious food, they are in charge of sanitation programs and health programs as well. So it's very important that we work with these coordinators within the Ghana Place project. Then we have taste and food culture. And this is where we look to celebrate the local dishes that are abundant in our food system, share food knowledge and eating practices to make our nutritious local foods familiar, desirable, and culturally meaningful for the children. If UPFs are all over the place and unhealthy foods are made very desirable in their environment, it's important that we turn the narrative and make our local foods more visible and desirable. And we have affordability and convenience. That's making sure that the recipes we co-design with the caterers, nutritionists as well, is affordable and it fits within school budgets and it's very practical for the caterers to prepare daily. We also talk about food safety, which is promoting safe food handling, making sure that all the foods that children access within the school food environment is prepared and served in hygienic conditions. And yeah, and also educating the children on food safety as well, basic food safety, and also the caterers and parents. Then we have equity, which is for us to recognize the differences in access across schools and communities. We are not just working with urban schools, we are working with rural schools as well. And we acknowledge that they have differences in access when it comes to what food is available for them and the choices as well. So we work within this framework of equity to realize that there are differences and we can work to reduce these gaps in who can access meals. Then we talk about sustainability. When we talk about sustainability, we talk about co-developing content-specific models that actually work for the schools and their capabilities. And it also includes training the caterers, parents, and children in nutrition, food safety, prioritizing local sourcing as well, and ensuring that the skills and knowledge that are passed on during the trainings remain within the schools beyond the project. We also talk about politics, that's policy, power, and decision making, where we have to understand how school rules, procurement systems, and national policies shape what food is available and who is allowed to provide it. Because even within the Ghana school food feeding program, it's not all government schools that have access to the program. So us understanding why some schools are accepted and some are not accepted is very essential for the project. And primarily, Ghana Plate seeks to reimagine the entire school food environment. And within this, we look at co-creating nutritious and tasty recipes. On the slide, we can see a mural of school children eating nutritious foods, possibly made from millet, fonio, beans, yam. Fonio millets are not quite present in their meals currently, so we envision that we can create recipes that incorporate these nutritious meals and are of benefits to their growth and well-being. We are also looking to making local and nutritious foods very visible and desirable. Just in the schools where we see murals and posters and brandings of all these ultra-processed foods, we seek to turn the narrative where you go to schools and you actually see murals of our local crops. So that is a little vision on the poster there. And then food education. Beyond the project, we want to actually co-create tools and education tools that like zines that can highlight our local crops and dishes and passing down food knowledge through these tools in the schools. So the children can come together, create creative zines, putting together pictures of recipes that we co-develop with them and put it together, and then they can have it in their schools, teach themselves and pass it on to other children as well. And then we will explore urban rural food connections as I mentioned earlier, where we can possibly connect schools in the rural areas who have farmlands to urban schools who do not have access to farmland and see how that also works. And so when we talk of reimagining the school environment, this is how it looks like for the Ghana Plate project. And yeah, so let's connect. There is a QR code on the screen where if you scan, it's going to take you to our website and you can have access to our Instagram, LinkedIn, and you can email Aimée too on her mail on the screen. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that comprehensive presentation. Now we will introduce the Q&A session, and I just want to say before that after this webinar, we will send a follow-up email. And in that email, you will have the contacts to the presenters and also the links to the presented organizations, as well as the presentations. You will also see in the chat already some of the links that have been mentioned today, such as the action map, so there you can find that quickly. Now, when doing this Q&A session, either you write in the chat your question and we make sure to pick it up and read it up for you, or you just do as you're used to do in a Teams meeting. You use the hand, you raise it, and then I'll make sure that you get the word and can ask your question. But before going into that, I wanted to take the chance to just briefly stay with you, Aimée and Maame, and also Olga. Because Aimée, you were pretty quick to mention now we're doing a conversation about food environments and we are doing it on quite an academic level here today. But yet some of the first words you said were coolness and hype, how this is important. And Olga, you are also pretty quick to mention how a food system transformation and food environments can and will be delicious, fun, beautiful. So I just wanted to take the chance to Aimée and Maame, maybe some words about why coolness and hype is worth mentioning in this discussion today about food environments.
Thank you so much, Pelle. No, indeed, that is our approach, just like it is for you, Reformaten. And young people are the future. Young people are going to shape what our food systems become. So we need to start very early. That's why we need to start educating kids, working with kids, co-developing with kids. And one thing I love from the research is Tamale is the photo voice approach, where the students themselves got to go out and take pictures of their food environment. And I'm imagining something similar for our project, where the students get to take pictures and document the fruits and vegetables and grains that are around them. Because we already know that, especially for the rural schools, there's so much farming going on around the school, but the crops and the produce of that farming is not necessarily ending up in the school meals. And there's almost a divide of some traditional and indigenous crops being eaten at home, but then when we come to the schools, it's very rice-based, very low diversity of the food. So if kids themselves got to show that just around them and even at home, they're eating all of these other nutritious crops, that could be a very good evidence for why we can bring it into the school meals as well.
Thank you so much. Maame, do you want to add one or two words to that?
Yeah, Aimée has said everything, but then the coolness to it is also about what is visible. For me, visual culture is very important. Growing up, we used to have murals of our local foods around, which we don't see anymore. When you go to a chop bar, what we call a chop bar, they prepare local foods, and you have a mural of the food being prepared, a picture of the food itself. So all of these things were educating us and informing our choices. But right now, we see the entire opposite. We have ultra-processed foods like Indomie, making it very cool to eat, because they are saying when you eat Indomie, you have superpowers and all of that. They're making it cool for them to eat. But if we turn it around and make it also cool that if you eat baobab, if you eat moringa, you're going to grow wings or something, is going to also inform change. Yeah, not to grow wings, but also just to make it cool for them. So I think within the school environment, visual culture is very important, because kids are easily influenced by what they see and what they hear. So within the Ghana Plate project, we also look to collaborate with local artists who can bring our vision to life on the walls of the students and around their schools. Long term is going to inform their choices. And so, yeah.
Thank you. I just want to say also that we're so happy to see the activities in the chat. Olga, when we have a food environment conversation and adhere to quite a rigid academic framework, why is it important for Reformaten to still mention the beauty, the fun, the joy of food environments?
Yeah, but I think it's like pretty clear because, well, like one of the personal domains that is shaping food environments or making you eat what you eat is desirability. So if we make the movement and the choices more desirable, because I think like what the environmental movement has failed is to package the whole transformation as something that you should not fly, you should not eat this, you should not do that. So it has been a negative framing. So it's not something that everyone want to take part of. And when you put it in a beautiful framing that looks good, it tastes good, it's fun, it's beautiful, that's something that is a desirable alternative then. So therefore, we are actually using one of the domains that's changing or shaping food environments for us to actually push the food environments towards the desirable future. So if we would use like a ugly layout and so on, then we would do the reversed. So say, oh, look at this really ugly but really nutritious crops. Then it would be like contradictive. So we work on both like the movement pushing towards that side with the help of the academia. So using the framework and the live it, we walk the talk with the academia kind of, yeah. I don't know if that was nonsense and bullshit. It's not
no, thanks for highlighting the role of the NGO's position and responsibility in the transition. Now, Chris, Paul, Fiorella, it's not my meaning to keep you out of this conversation, but I want to take the chance to highlight one of the questions from the comments, and then we have the chance for a clarification or elaboration on that. So, David, we had one question in the chat for you to read.
Yes, precisely. One question, Christopher already gave an extensive answer in the chat, but for the benefit of the rest of the audience, maybe you could expand on it and repeat your answer. Bright was asking, how do urban production spaces, specifically urban and peri-urban farms, contribute to food environments within this framework? With a question about, does it fit in the external or personal domain, and then in which category?
Yeah, thank you for that, Bright. Really interesting question. So, interestingly, so I actually started looking at urban ag. So I'm really a human geographer that started working on urban ag in Ghana, in Techiman and Tamale, in 2011, 2012, something like that, during my master's studies days. So I actually, my entry point to food systems and the food environment was through urban ag. So this was really interesting for me just to think this through a little bit and revisit. So as I mentioned in the chat, I think first things first is no framework can ever be so comprehensive that everything fits perfectly into every single box, and no framework can be everything to everybody. That's something that I've definitely learned over the past decade in sort of trying to think through conceptual frameworks for food environments. So the whole thing around food sources is in the presentation today is something we usually sort of pitch in the first instance, say food environments are more than just market-based food sources, which often they're considered to be. They're not only that, they're also about own production, whether that's urban, peri-urban, rural ag, or wild food harvesting, or transfers and gifts and things like that, either between citizens or from the state level, right? So there's this whole sort of rich tapestry of food sources within the food environment, of which urban ag is one of them. As I mentioned in the chat, clearly urban ag is also a very diverse sector as well, if you want to refer to it our food source. So everything from kitchen gardens and home market gardens to sort of cooperatives and all the way up to more market-driven, so what you might consider to be market-driven sort of professional agricultural organizations, right? Just working in peri-urban and urban spaces. So I think it really depends on your context, what type of urban ag it is, how it fits in. If it's more towards the kind of household end of things, to me, it would be under the external food environment, but as a kind of, in relation to that household and in relation to their capacity around, own production, essentially. If it was more towards the kind of market orientated large scale production in peri-urban areas, then I would say it's more sort of on the fringes of the sort of production end of food system. But just although a lot closer in proximity to urban spaces in that sense. So it's not clear cut. It's a bit of a grey area. As I said, nothing. It doesn't necessarily fit perfectly into the framework. But the idea of the framework is really to try and put together some organizing principles and some ideas around this idea of external and then personal, relative to individuals, and then that interaction between being that lived experience, really thinking through how people acquire and consume foods as part of their daily life. There are other ways and other lenses you could approach this. As I was hearing a presentation earlier, I was thinking about, it'd be interesting to look at what Aimée presented in Ghana Food Movement and think about the vendor perspective on the food environment framework, and what would that look like if you were looking at it not from a food acquisition and consumption, but from a vendor perspective in terms of sale, which is kind of what we were looking at a bit in the PIFI project, but you could think of it in that way, or you could apply a whole range of different lenses to it, of which urban ag, clearly could be one of them. So I'm not sure if that fully answers your question, but it was kind of things that made me think, that kind of cropped up in my mind as I was reading it through. It's interesting. The other one that's come up more recently is the whole thing around digital food sources, which I didn't mention in the presentation, but the whole thing around online food environments, even in Ghana as well. We found that in the PIFI project too, which is the other key contribution in that revised version of the framework, this idea of digital food sources. So yeah, I also like Pelle's framing of the dusty academic idea of uncool academics.
I didn't imply that.
I'm just joking.
I think we're all pretty cool. But thank you for the clarification. And we also want to take the chance, Fiorella and Paul, to ask if you could address all of the participants that we have here today and really talk to them. It's various different stakeholders and actors represented, but the toolkit that you presented from the project, how could we come to think of this toolkit addressing all of us that looks now? Who would you think of as your primary target group for this toolkit, and what would be your sort of dream way of seeing this amazing material being used out in all over the world? I'll let you answer organically, the both of you.
Professor, after you.
Fiorella can take that up.
Paul, please go. You first.
Okay. Maybe the toolkits. Let me start with academics, practitioners. I mean, the toolkit is so down to earth, so basic that we believe the different stakeholders, once you are interested in a bit of research, you should be able to use it. It's so accessible. So academics, various stakeholders like those gathered here, I believe you will find that very useful because it outlines how. You also have the why and what it should all lead to. So I think it's good for everyone. Yeah, thank you. So Fiorella, you can come in now.
So yeah, just to kind of continue on Paul's inputs. So I think, yeah, the kind of to bring a little bit to life what this with this kind of approach, kind of looking at the full cycle allows us to achieve. So I want to give two examples. One is about food safety, and one is about how fun and hype work in how we have seen it operationalized in our project. So first of all, with food safety, what we have seen that the way it is organized, how the international organizations that operationalize food safety, such as the Codex Alimentarius, the WHO, WTO, and FAO have put it, are in a way unwillingly, or I would say somehow also willingly, opening space for ultra-processed food. The idea that fresh food that is sold by vendors outside is not safe, is not hygienic, is creating space for packaged food to be presented as a safe option. So, and I'm not saying that food safety is not something, we have to take high consideration of, but we need to kind of reframe what food safety is. If food safety is, so if a food is not safe, ultra-processed foods are not safe because they make us ill, then ultra-processed food is not food. we have to, yeah, I think there is a bit of a space here to open up and contest what the kind of rigid forms of food safety and definitions are. And we have seen that because children really value the safety, the cleanliness, the freshness of their vendors, and they do not like this kind of messiness and like uncleanliness of certain vendors that might be associated with ultra-processed foods. The second one is how fun and hype work. So we have seen in the creation of preferences or material cultures, as we call it, the role of social media and how the unregulated advertising sector is creating those preferences. So, for example, we have looked at the value chain of Bigou, which like a carbonated drink that looks like Coca-Cola, and Bigou has one of the most incredible influencers in Ghana. So Stonebwoy is like the front figure man for Bigou. They have a very, very popular family show that is broadcasted at the time where children come at home. We have talked to media agencies, and they tell us that corporations go to them. They tell them to showcase their advertisement at 3 p.m. when children come back from home, showcase them on the radio. So that's how hype and cool works for the ultra-processed foods. And the idea is basically, I think, for the work that Reformaten and the Ghana food movement do, is like, how do you break that entry point that these ultra-processed food companies can use because they have like multi-billion budgets and make fresh food that, you don't create that level of profits to have the same visibility. So I think this is the kind of role of this type of toolkits, to kind of show how things are connected from the very micro level to the point of consumption all the way to the point of production and marketing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those answers. We'll take the chance to highlight one of the questions from the chat again, and it will be my colleague David who does that.
Yes, another question that already got answered in the chat by Fiorella this time, but maybe you could expand on it. Thomas asked about the statistic where girls on average are more than twice as overweight as boys in Ghana. Fiorella, you added a link to a study talking about social and physiological aspects of this. Maybe you can expand on what those aspects are.
Yeah, sure. Again, I think so. I'm not a nutritionist or like a medical professional, so I'm not going to be able to completely explain the physiological aspects about increased or like higher prevalence of overweight obesity between boys and girls. But there are some social aspects that are very much into the mix. It links to mobility, gendered mobility, and also opportunities for sports and being more active into society. And then that kind of continues across the lifespan of boys and girls. So like when the girls enter into that kind of phase of womanhood, where those spaces and those abilities for mobility are like more reduced. But yeah, I think that paper that I put in the chat kind of explains that a bit more for everyone else.
Thank you for that clarification. We will highlight one more of the questions from the chat and also invite if anyone would like to raise their hand and ask a question to this panel of experts that we have pinned here. David, we have one more question from the chat.
Yes, another question from Maeva, perhaps specifically for Olga, asking, are schools also a focus for Reformaten's food environment analysis and projects?
Thank you for that question. And we work partly with school, but not only. So we have also done this kind of collaboration where kids go around and take photos of the food environments. But David, I take the freedom and answer another question that pop up in the chat because I'm never following instructions. But anyway, so this question, it was a question from Bright regarding how we work with public institutions, both Ghana Food Movement and Reformaten, and we work with them a lot. So like within the food environment mission, like this platform I mentioned, then actually we have done like the material that the Swedish Public Health Agency use in their work with food environment. So in that sense, we as an organization that has like bigger maybe ambition level about working with the food environment, we push the public agencies in Sweden to raise their ambition level within the work by using our produced material. So in that sense, we collaborate with the public health agency. And when it comes to the food agency, then we include them like when we hold a lot of events and panel discussion within Reformaten's work, then we always collaborate and invite them. We also sit in advisory boards for their work, so in their official advisory boards. And also when, like for example, when the Public Health Agency in Sweden released their suggestions for the politicians to take actions that would change food environments, then we see that the public demand or awareness is not existing among the Swedish population. So then we take their materials, turn it into this Matbarometer, the food survey, and make a survey. So we help the public agencies to come out with material by forcing the political parties to answer questions regarding their material. So in that sense, we also bridge the gaps between the different stakeholders by taking their material and forcing politicians to act, and then making a fun, trendy event where people come and read the material. So we do it in many different angles, but in Sweden, at least, the public agencies have a very tight relationship with the industry as well. So here we see, like, for example, in Sweden, the debate against around the ultra-processed food is not that good as in other countries, because in Sweden, the narrative about food and food systems are so controlled by the industry. So our public agencies don't dare to say things against the industry either. So it's like they like more to give like recommendations to people about what to eat, but they're more going into more the systemic approach as well, because otherwise it would be very embarrassing. Because why are public institutions there to protect the people or the industry? Okay, so Ghana Food Movement, you should ask the same, like answer the same question.
Exactly, me and Maame, it was also directed to you for Ghana Food Movement. So how is your organization working with state infrastructures or public governing bodies?
Sure, I will start and then, yeah, I'll leave it to you, Maame. But when it comes to this policy and advocacy, Reformaten has always been like a big role model for us, because we have not like started doing our advocacy, developing these frameworks in the way that Reformaten has. And that is one of the main reasons of partnering on the Ghana Plate project, so that once we have been able to pilot the process with a couple of schools, test it with some more schools, and build up a framework for the Ghana Plate to actually be able to present it to the policymakers, to show that, look, this is possible. These are the challenges and these are the opportunities when it comes to incorporating indigenous and local crops into school meals. And that's where we are going to work super closely with Reformaten in coming up with a strong strategy for engaging those stakeholders. And one thing I wanted to mention is that we will also be coming to Sweden to visit Reformaten in May, and there will be some type of open event, I think I can promise. So for all of you that are listening and are in Stockholm, there will be an opportunity to actually meet in person and continue these conversations. And especially on how we bring relevant stakeholders on board to those conversations. But Maame, maybe you can talk a little bit about the agencies that we do engage with, for example, the FDA.
Yes, so for our framework, we had food safety, for instance, which we know the FDA is mandated to oversee. And so along the line, we're still going to collaborate with them to join us for the training programs in food safety for the caterers, for the school kids as well, and for the parents. So within the framework, I think it's all connected to policymakers in a way. So we are going to collaborate with them as the project progresses, just as Aimée mentioned. But then already we have connections with them, and so it will be easy to move on from there.
And Maame, I know that you are right now in the process of being in dialogue and talking with a lot of schools as part of the project. Maybe you'd also like to take the chance here to say something about all of the cool collaborations that we, and especially you, are planning to do now with schools through Ghana Plate.
Yes, sure. So we've already started engaging urban and rural schools, and it is first about relationship building. So to meet with them, present what Ghana Food Movement is about, and see if there's alignment. That is the starting point. Because if we shouldn't assume that schools or caterers or the school administration wants to change something with the school meal. So for us, the entry point is schools that are experiencing that the school meals could be better, they could be more nutritious. So that's where we've also partnered up with previous partners that are working with schools. And one example is the NAS Network Ghana, so Neglected and Underutilized Species Ghana. They are opening seed banks in different communities to save and trade indigenous crops and seeds. So we've been quite intentional with starting engaging the schools that are close to seed banks, because naturally the farmers in those communities are going to be growing more indigenous crops. So why can't we also try to see if we can use those indigenous crops into the school meals in the schools in those communities? And when we went there, it was so amazing, because for the seed bank opening, the community had done a display of the indigenous crops that they have in the area, but also of the traditional meals and dishes that they make in that area. And for most of us in the team coming from Accra, it was dishes we had never heard about. And that area in the eastern region, close to Koforidua, they have a lot of cocoyam. So they were presenting 4 different dishes based on cocoyam that we had never heard about before. But then when we asked, okay, but is there any of these meals that appear also in the school feeding? It was no, because the government provides rice, and that is why a lot of the school meal is going to be based on the rice that is provided by the government, and so on. But we also noticed that the school has its own farm, the parents have their own farm, so there's so much potential to integrate more of those crops. And as Maame mentioned, can we make some connections between these rural schools that have a lot of abundance around them and urban schools that do not have the same type of abundance of produce around them? Because our first engagements with urban schools have really shown that it's really tough to get access to fresh produce. So we have a little dream of making connections there, but we really have to see logistically, sustainably, like what could that connection look like? So those are some of our first findings and engagements, but much more to come.
And I had to cut in there. And I will also say that in this series actually of disseminations and communications that we will do together, we are planning to do one global talk conversation webinar, especially on school food, but it will be more information and communications on that. Now we have a lot of different interesting thoughts and questions about the framework, but we do not have time to dive into them, but we can all take with us how a food environment frameworks engage with, for example, Bourdieu's theory of taste and a process relational lens. Now I know that there is an update of the framework coming up, and maybe we will have the possibility to do more in-depth conversations about the food environment framework that we've been referring to today. This is the wrap up of our conversation today, and I can only start with saying thank you to the brilliant speakers for taking your time and spreading your knowledge and insights from the work that you are doing. Also, thank you to all of the brilliant participants. It has been a pure joy to see all of the activities in the chat. And as I mentioned, we will do a follow-up email with more information and way to get in contact with us. And I'd like to return to one of the key insights from today's conversation, and that is that transforming food environments require us to work on both sides at the same time. We need to, as we have highlighted in the conversations, map and address the food that we don't need, the product structures and incentives that drive ill health and environmental pressure. But at the same time, we must actively strengthen and scale the food that we do need, the systems, the actors, the solutions that promote health, sustainability, equity. Because as we've been highlighting in all of the presentations today, this is not a conversation about individual blame, but it is about how food environments are organized, governed, and shaped, and how we can work together across sectors to continue to change that. Thank you again to all of the speakers, and thank you again for everyone who joined us today. I look forward to contact each and every one of you present here with a follow-up email. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for
Thank you.
for coordinating and leading this